the basic story of Rapunzel is that the woman who lived next door to her parents was a sorceress by the name of Dame Gothel. And Gothel actually in German means godmother. So Dame Gothel was this incredible gardener, and she had a walled garden. She didn't want anybody in her garden. And the next door neighbors who the woman was pregnant with Rapunzel, wanted some salad greens from Dame Gothel's garden, and she sent her husband up over the wall to get the greens. Well, one night Dame Gothel caught him, and she made a bargain with him that he could have as many of the greens as he wanted for his wife, but he would have to give her the child. And she would raise that child up as well as her own salad greens. So when the woman gave birth, Dame Gothel, I see her as this very, very tight, grasping sort of energy. She came barreling into the room, right into the birth room, and she took Rapunzel right out of her mother's arms. And she named the baby Rapunzel. And then she swept her away into her own little hoard, her own little house. And she raised her only according to her own views of the world. And when Rapunzel grew, she grew so beautiful. She had this long auburn hair that flowed and flowed, and she had a gorgeous singing voice. And the older she got, the more attractive she became. And of course, Dame Gothel did not want the world coming to Rapunzel. So what did she do? She went into the forest, and with her spells, she made this high tower. And she took Rapunzel up into that place and she put her there. And then she sealed off the door and made the stair disappear. So there was no way to getting up to see Rapunzel except by her hair. So as we all know, she would go to the tower and she would call up, "Rapunzel, let your hair down," to me. And Rapunzel would uncoil her braids of hair, hang them on the lintel, on a hook over the lintel, and throw them down to Dame Gothel, and she would climb up. So one day, this king's son is riding through the forest, and he hears this beautiful voice. And he follows the voice as if it were a bird to this clearing. And what does he see? He looks up and he sees this beautiful maiden in the tower. And he watches for long enough that he sees how Dame Gothel goes up and down. He learns the ropes. And so one day, one evening after she's gone, he goes up the rope. And for the first time in Rapunzel's entire life, someone other than Dame Gothel comes through the window. And not only other than Dame Gothel, but an attractive other than Dame Gothel, a wonderful man who is bringing to her knowledge of all the world outside and of her own self and of her own predicament. And so he comes up, and this all has to be kept quiet, has to be kept hidden. And then they have a love affair, and one day Dame Gothel discovers that Rapunzel is pregnant, and she completely freaks out. And she exiles Rapunzel to the desert. She cuts off her hair, and she casts a spell that exiles her to the desert. And then she takes the coil of hair, throws it down when the prince comes later on that day. And when he climbs up the rope, and he sees the visage of this horrible sorceress, he's so shocked, he falls off the side of the tower, and he lands in the briars at the base of the tower, and his eyes are pierced. And so, bleeding tears, he staggers away from the tower, wailing. And then you have this situation which is very much like the Garden of Eden. It's very much like that. Rapunzel now knows herself, but for that knowledge, she's been exiled to the desert in this wasteland. And he has been exiled to the wilderness, where he staggers around blinded. and he feeds himself on the nuts and the berries, the fruits of the forest, but he has no bearings. He doesn't know how to find his way in the world, and he doesn't have his eyes that are so important to our culture, our eyes. And so that's the situation. These two, the male and the female, the woman and the man, the two parts of ourselves are split. And Rapunzel in the desert lives in poverty. She has twins, a little boy and a little girl. She raises them, begins to raise them all on her own with the little community that she finds there. And one day, the prince, who is wandering through the wilderness, following everything other than his eyes. He's following his ears and his sense of touch and everything that he can pick up with all his other senses. He hears a song. He hears a song that is so deeply familiar to him that he begins to follow it. And he follows it into the wasteland where he finds his beloved again. And so he follows his ears to the song of Rapunzel and is reunited with her. And when she sees him, she weeps, and her tears have this extraordinary power. And when they fall upon his eyes are healed and he can see again. And now he sees the world very differently. And he gathers his family together and they return to his kingdom. And there they live in contentment from that day forward.